on your time for questions and Q&A. Thank you.
Thank you very much, General Secretary. If you can just give me 1 minute to address a hiccup. I'm just realizing what's projected is slightly different from what I think I clicked on a wrong document when I sent to the comms people.
Yes.
Okay.
We are also being encouraged to put our phone on silence. They are interfering with the websites. Thank you.
The Most Reverend Dr. Paul Boafo, President of the African Methodist Council, the Organizing Committee of the Methodist Heads of Conferences Summit, Your Excellencies, the moderator for this session, and all protocols observed. Before I come to my presentation, I will bring fraternal greetings to you from the General Secretary of the All Africa Conference of Churches, the greetings which you would find in the booklet which has been provided here for the conference. So your black book, and the last ones, the fraternal greetings, the last fraternal greetings in this book are the ones that I will be referring to or reading to you. And they come from the All Africa Conference of Churches General Secretary. I bring greetings from the All Africa Conference of Churches General Secretary, Reverend Dr. Fidon Ngombeki. The All Africa Conference of Churches extends its warm fraternal greetings and heartfelt blessings as you gather at this summit. This gathering is of great importance, not only for the Methodist Church in Africa, but for the entire continent, striving towards justice, peace, dignity, and abundant life. As in John 10:10, the thief comes only in order to steal, kill, and destroy. I came that they may have and enjoy life and have it in abundance. The AACC deeply appreciates the important role in the Methodist Church. The Methodist Church has advanced and continued to advance in shaping the social, political, and economic dialogue of and about Africa. You have remained steadfast and thriving even in the midst of challenges. From your pioneering contributions in education and health, and to your unwavering advocacy for human rights and social justice, among others, the Methodist Church has constantly demonstrated a profound commitment to the well-being of communities and the broader African populace. Your unwavering dedication to serving the most vulnerable and the marginalized members of society and to remain prophetic serves as the inspiration to the broader church in Africa. Indeed, Africa is our home, it is our future. The theme of your summit, Transformation of the Socio-Political and Economic Landscape of Africa, the Methodist Factor, resonates profoundly with the AACC's vision, which is Churches in Africa for Life, Peace, Justice, and Dignity. The AACC, too, is deeply encouraged in fostering holistic transformation across the African continent, recognizing that genuine and sustainable change requires a multifaceted approach that addresses the interconnected challenges of lack of life-giving conditions, dignity, justice, and peace. We believe that the church, as a moral compass and agent of reconciliation, has a crucial role to play in the transformative process of Africa and the church itself. The challenges are immense, but so too is the potential for positive change when churches such as you, the Methodist Church, collaborate effectively and leverage your collective strengths. We, at the All Africa Conference of Churches, stand in solidarity with the African Methodist Council on this journey of reflection and action. We are confident that your deliberations over the past days have yielded valuable insights and strategies that will contribute significantly to the transformation of the church in Africa and on the African continent, especially in fulfilling the Great Commission, bringing unity, reconciliation, justice, and peace on the African continent. May the Holy Spirit guide your discussions in the remaining days, inspire your final decisions, and empower you to continue being the salt and light to the world. Remain steadfast. The AACC looks forward to continuing our collaborative journey with you towards a transformed Africa. Thank you. This I read on behalf of the AACC General Secretary, Reverend Dr. Fidon Mwombeki. Now I would come to the assignment of talking on the role of the church in conflict resolution. And again, it is my great pleasure and honor to be on this podium with this opportunity to speak at this Heads of Conferences Summit. I would also want to appreciate the AACC General Secretary, again, Reverend Dr. Fidon Mwombeki, for letting me stand in for him by deflecting this honor and opportunity to me when he is on an important ecumenical mission to Europe. The central argument of this public lecture is the role of the church in conflict resolution. My caveat and confession today is that I'm no expert in conflict resolution, but I am a fellow worker on this pilgrimage for justice, peace, and conflict resolution on the African continent. Therefore, I am going to dwell or to share my and the ASCC's experiences, which might also relate to your own experiences as Methodists. We know that you have been in the trenches for long enough to understand and articulate the role of the church in conflict transformation. The letter of invitation to us at the AACC read, "We are incredibly happy with the role of the AACC in discussing these issues with the African Union. You're coming here to share as the Continental Ecumenical Motherboard will express the unity of the church in peace building, and this is the reason I stand before you today." And so my talk will not be necessarily an academic paper, but will be on sharing experiences, a walk through a journey through which I will share a few marker pegs on what the church has done in conflict resolution and peace building, which I hope will in turn bring light to the role of the church in conflict resolution. So I will be highlighting some of the things that have happened or things that the church have been involved in the hope that we'll be able to address the theme, which is the role of the church in conflict resolution. A lot has been done, and to which the church needs to continue in that path, and a lot remains to be done too. It is never enough. Context keeps on changing every day, and so much our responses too should also be adaptive. This gathering is a beacon of hope, signifying a chapter, a different reality, and a brighter future. Our hearts yearn to understand God's calling. "Peace I leave with you, my peace I give unto you, not as the world giveth. Give I unto you, let not your heart be troubled, neither let it be afraid." And this is from James 14, verse 27. I will just go ahead and look at prevention. Part the role the work of the church is on prevention. The central intent of the role of church's involvement in conflict resolution must not be seen as mere bandaging the wounds. Rather, prevention is central to it. My central belief is that we cannot wait until the world dismantles or the context fall apart and then try to puzzle it out altogether later. Perhaps the scriptures also represent this, a call for us to be the light of the world and the salt of the earth. In the Lord's Prayer, we, the church, must seek to have the will of God to be done on earth as it is in heaven. In this vein, beside the role that AACC plays in ecumenical diplomacy and prevention, we are calling for mediation to be a core pillar of pre-conflict response and not only post-conflict response. A non-violence pillar in response to architectures of peace and security on the African continent is also needed. This might resonate with you too. The headlines that we often see on television is we see mediation only after conflicts would have erupted. We don't hear of mediation pre-conflict. And it is fundamental to actually look at this when early warning signs are already giving indications to mounting tensions in different contexts. Or if the early warning signs are loud, this is what we see, and vivid, the early response is often wanting, and this is our dilemma. The conflicts plaguing Africa are multifaceted. They are not simply about territorial disputes or political power struggles. They are rooted in deep-seated historical injustices, economic inequalities, ethnic tensions, lack of good governance, you name them. Some of them have been referred to throughout this consultation. The unconstitutional extension of terms of office, as witnessed in several countries, is a blatant disregard for the will of the people and a direct threat to democratic stability. These actions often fuel further conflict and suffering. The ongoing wars, while geographically distinct, they all share common threads: the exploitation of resources, the manipulation of ethnic divisions, and the failure of institutions to protect their citizens. The church has a role in mediation. Church leaders can act as mediators, facilitating dialogue between warring factions and helping them find common ground. They can also act as inside mediators post eruption of conflicts. As we see early signs of conflicts mounting, we can already step into the space to begin to initiate those dialoguing spaces. Advocacy for human rights. In advocacy for justice, the church must be a vocal advocate for justice and human rights. It must speak out against oppression, corruption, which is a weevil eating deeper into African governance systems. As we know, human rights abuses, we need to be holding those in power accountable to their actions, and I feel that this is important. This advocacy must be grounded in our faith, emphasizing the inherent dignity of every human being. God created us all in his own image and likeness. That's from Genesis 1, verse 27. Additionally, conflicts are they leave deep emotional scars. The church must provide pastoral care and trauma healing services to victims of violence, helping them to cope with their experiences and to rebuild their lives. Transitional justice, restoration, and healing are some of the areas the church has demonstrated excellencies in various contexts across Africa, and perhaps some of you are already involved in this. And perhaps we must continue to multiply this good work on the African continent. The church, like I said before, is no stranger in peace building and conflict resolution. Since time immemorial, she has been tackling conflict, whether it is non-international armed conflict or what we call civil wars, or international armed conflicts in which more than two countries are involved. Oftentimes, internal armed conflicts, they can also be proxy wars, right? Where countries that are invisible to the war are actually fighting, and on prima facie, it looks like it's those countries in country that are fighting, but there are also other countries that are fighting beyond. So those foreign interests in themselves playing out on the African continent as well. My brothers and sisters, your excellencies, bishops, let me say conflict is inevitable. It is the reality, but reconciliation is possible, and so is positive peace. I say positive peace because peace is not the mere absence of armed conflict, but like the invitation letter that was sent to AACC to this conference indicates, the majority of the citizens are suffering from suppressions that include unconstitutional extension of terms of office for the sitting political leaders. This is happening in the so-called peaceful nations. Part in response to the role of church in conflict resolution, let me introduce my own invention. In my own invention, I take this from Philippians 4, verses 8 and 9. It reads, "Finally, brethren, whatsoever things are true, whatsoever things are honest, whatsoever things are just, whatsoever things are pure, whatsoever things are lovely, whatsoever things are of good report, if there be virtue, and if there be any praise, think on these things, those things which you have both learned and received and heard and seen in me, and do. And the God of peace shall be with you." So I would like to introduce this framework that I said myself. You can move one, yeah. This framework, which has that diagram, it starts with finding excellence. For me, excellence, and why excellence? I think because it is known to us that the start of the church working in conflict resolution is not signaled by my talk here today or by this talk. The church has always done so, and the church might only need a reminder and encouragement, perhaps new ideation, and the need to reinvent herself. In this case, the starting point, therefore, to scan or identify what we have is to identify what we have done, what we are doing well, what excellencies there has been in our responses to conflict as Methodist Church Council. Such excellencies can inspire us forward. Perhaps what assets are at our disposals. What have we done before and what are we doing now? If we just look around and say, what is our response to conflict resolutions? Maybe we can draw inspiration from them. Perhaps Moses had a staff, Miriam had a tambourine, David had a sling. Yes, it is notable to reflect on what we have, perhaps our history and perhaps our current interventions. Perhaps we can say we have institutions that train mediators. Certainly, I know some of the institutions of the Methodist Church that strive to be centers of excellence in mediation, conflict resolution, governance, and leadership. The church and its training institutions can and must become centers of excellence for mediation and peace building. From refresher courses to university-level programs, we can equip individuals to address conflict effectively. Some universities of the Methodist Church, they have succeeded in training what are called inside mediators in partnership with some partners maybe abroad. Perhaps a need to look at that and say, how do we scale this across the board? Perhaps some church leaders in the Methodist Church have been involved in mediation efforts, perhaps during colonial times and post-colonial times. In some of the countries, the first persons to form political parties that were anti-colonialism were ordained ministers of religion. And some of them, if we recall and look around in our institutions, we already begin to put names to this. What lessons can we draw from the work that have been done by such personalities, their role in activism and negotiations that brought independence to our countries? These are recorded down in history, possibly in our own archives. But I think they can also serve as inspiration or as inspiration to what the church can do today in conflict resolution. I must say that in one of the countries, which is the country where I come from, one of the national peace negotiators is actually a priest from one of the churches. The church is not short of such examples too, when you look at all regions across Africa, even in context of civil war. Names come to mind, like I said, in the All Africa Conference of Churches. At some point we played mediation in the Sudan conflict, in which we were the chief negotiator as the All Africa Conference of Churches with the backup from the World Council of Churches. We have some councils of churches perhaps involved in this shuttle diplomacy across different parties that are involved, that would have been involved in conflict. And in 2018, for example, the South Sudan Council of Churches became one of the guarantors for the revitalized peace agreement, right? And the work of maybe in the past of the people that we know, maybe people like Archbishop Desmond Tutu, maybe Bishop Singulani in Mozambique, in the Mozambique Civil War, and possibly many councils of churches and some of the churches as well have been involved in this. So it's important that we begin to look at what we have done well and then begin then to say, I move on and then begin then to say, what is the higher calling? That's my H, sorry, just move back a bit. Yes, what is our higher calling? What is God calling us beyond what we are doing today? What is God calling us beyond what is enabling us today? So having really looked at what we are doing today and the excellencies in which we maybe glow in, then we need to look at what are those things that, where is God calling us to today? I basically feel that it is then descending on the fact that, yes, we have excellencies, but do we bask in their glory and stop there? Or we then must seek God's higher calling to the excellencies we are known for by ourselves and by others. Perhaps accelerate these, pray for discernment, and let God reveal the realms beyond where we are today. Let's seek the higher calling. Perhaps it teaches us not to be comfortable, but to remain on the guard. I think at some point people say, and maybe you have already heard this, like, were we sleeping? Maybe in those years we were doing very well. After we did well, maybe we went and dined with the enemy, or we went and just fell asleep. So this higher calling teaches us that we should not bask in the glory of what is going on today well, but we should actually continue to seek a higher calling. And my eye there represent on the need for us to invest in what we see as our higher calling, the realms above our excellencies, and put structures to support our visions. And then my last one, which is practice and sustain, is basically then to say we need to begin to walk that path. It's good to have a vision, but maybe it's useless to have a vision if we cannot walk that path. We need to talk, yes, but we need to talk, yes, but we need to talk the walk without walking it. It's not going to help us. In articulation of the AHIP, this framework that I have here, in terms of really practicing and sustaining, I caught someone called Les Brown. He says the grave is the richest place on earth because it is here that you find all the hopes and dreams that were never fulfilled, the books that were never written, the songs that were never sung, the inventions that were never shared, the cures that were never discovered, and all because someone did not invest in them. How many things have we said? Are we hearing new things today, or we are hearing things that we say again and again and again in each and every meeting? We are saying those things again and again and again because no one is walking the talk. So the need for us to walk that talk is very, very important, and the need for us to begin to invest and then be able to sustain that, it is important. Basically, I'm challenging us to invest in our dreams in conflict resolution, and then say all the things that we have talked about are there on the path to the grave. The nuggets that we have harvested throughout the 2 days of our meetings here in Nairobi, are we singing them to burial, to the grave now as we sit here? Walking the path, walking the talk is crucial, and not just mere talking the path or the walk. What to do is always the easier path. Perhaps we should not choose to walk the easier path, the wider road instead of the narrow path. It is my trust that it is not the case with the Methodist Council Church here. With the Methodist Council here. The world thirsts for peace and for mediators. The church is called to be a sanctuary, must become a gushing wellspring of that peace, a refugee from conflict, and a cooling balm to wounded hearts. We cannot simply preach peace. We must live it, and we must exude it as Methodists and be midwiferys to birth it. Christ's promise in John 14:27 says, "Peace I leave with you, my peace I give you," is not a suggestion, but I suppose it's a mandate. Let us rise to challenge and be peacemakers the world so desperately needs. Walking the path. One of the things that we can do as churches is actually to use the soft power that we have as churches. Political scientist Joseph, who coined the term soft power, defined soft power as the ability to shape the preferences of others through appeal and attraction. It contrasts with hard power, which relies on coercion through military force or economic sanctions. Soft power aims to influence by being attractive, engaging, and persuasive, rather than imposing dominance. Use of soft power such as trust, legitimacy, credibility, moral standing, legitimacy, and the ability to persuade can be one of our strengths as churches, because we have all this. I bet the church is a trusted partner when it comes to talking about peace, its integrity, its service to humanity through spiritual guidance, but also through things that nations and communities can tangibly see and vouch for. According to an article of the World Bank written by 3 authors, entitled Market Share of Faith-Inspired Healthcare Providers in Africa, Comparison Facilities and Multi-Purpose Integrated Household. This, I took basically this statistic for us actually to see that out there, the church has credibility, and this is the World Bank actually cited that The church in Africa, for example, between 40 to 70% of health facilities on the African continent are run by churches. In Malawi, Kenya, Lesotho, Nigeria, Ghana, 40% of healthcare services are provided by faith-based institutions. In the DRC, 70% of health services are run by church-related institutions. In Uganda, 70.7% of nursing midwifery schools are run by faith-based institutions. In Zambia, 50% of rural healthcare provision is provided by faith-based organizations and churches. Zimbabwe is 45% of the national healthcare service. So, and these are statistics that I took from 2015 because I could not find any latest statistics around that. This gives credibility to the church in terms of what we are doing, but it also credibility to when we call for accountability in terms of what we are doing besides what the work that the church is doing spiritually. I think the role of the church in education institutions as well vouch for itself. Track 2 and Track 3 diplomacy. Track 3 and Track 2 diplomacy, the church is doing quite a lot around that. Spiritual leaders and faith-based organizations are often unsung heroes in conflict resolution, playing a crucial, often overlooked role in Track 2 and Track 3 diplomacy. Their unique access to communities, their moral authority, and their commitment to peacemaking makes them invaluable assets in navigating complex conflicts. Unlike formal diplomatic channels, Track 3 and Track 2 initiatives facilitated by religious figures can foster trust, bridge divides, and initiate dialogue where official negotiations could have stalled. The efforts often lay the groundwork for formal peace processes. And in learning from, I just thought that we could also learn from anecdotes of churches involved in conflict resolution from before, and how churches in Africa, maybe just a few anecdotes, how they have organized themselves around some of the work that they have done. So here I have given an example of how churches had come together long time back at the formation then in history of what was called Edisesa in Southern Africa, which was formed by the Fellowship of Councils of Churches in Eastern and Southern Africa, the fellowship of which was formed, yes, by the Fokesa then, which then now is the Fokisa. Then it was to give an authentic voice to the churches in Southern Africa region and to their ecumenical partners, to give a voice of the churches, because then most of the countries in Southern Africa were still under colonial rule, or there was conflict either in Mozambique or in Angola. There were all those conflicts that was going on. But also because of suppression of freedom of speech, it was also difficult, for example, for the church in South Africa to be able to speak inside South Africa. So the churches decided to bring their voices outside South Africa to speak from somewhere and collect that voice and be able to conjure the voice in their advocacy work across. We also know the Fellowship of Councils of Churches in the Great Lakes region and the Horn of Africa, the FECLAHA, which is a regional ecumenical organization that was launched in March 1999 and launched here in Kenya to provide members with an avenue for sharing perspectives on matters of peace and conflict transformation, steered by the endless conflicts rampant in the region. Since its inception, FECLAHA has taken the lead in enhancing peace and reconciliation in the Great Lakes and Horn of Africa through facilitating of ecumenical cooperation and fellowship within the framework of holistic Christian ministry. We all know the work of the Kenyan Truth, Justice and Reconciliation Commission and how the churches here in Kenya played a key role in that. We also know of the role played by the churches in Mozambique, and just to say a bit on Mozambique, the work they did during the civil war, which was in country there. And there as well, the church called on Christians to fast and pray. They wrote material for young people about peace, lobbying politicians together through the Council of Churches in Mozambique. They issued pastoral letters, mediation dialogue, transitional justice and healing, and all those things they were actually facilitating. I think the dialogue that led to the end of the conflict in Mozambique was actually facilitated by the churches in a way. And in their dialogue, they went ahead and tried to find Renamo and Frolim to dialogue. And it was the churches that went and tried to identify when dialogue was beginning to mature, to identify the representatives maybe of RENAMO in the United States to then come and have their meetings here of dialogue in Kenya, which then led to those meetings that then took place in Rome. So the church has a role in transitional justice, in the transitional justice and healing period. And this is the time during the time for disarmament, demobilization, and reintegration, which is a process where we are just coming from war. I think the church the church in Mozambique then was able to facilitating processes for hearing and for listening from communities. And from their listening and hearing from the communities, that led into a program that was called by the Council of Churches, Turning Swords into Plowshares, in which the church was very instrumental in trying, because there were still lots of guns after the cessation of hostilities. So first they got the guns, then they made them usable, and they called people to turn the guns into instruments of production. So if you had a gun, you would come and exchange it for something productive and for a certain skill that you actually didn't know. And that was actually done by the church to de-glorify the war, but also arms that they had collected, they used this to produce artistic objects. If you have been to Mozambique, you know art is kind of like one of the souls that make the people there beat. So they looked at something that speaks most to the souls of the people there, then to say how best can they move forward. And they were actually able to do that. And the Cabo Delgado conflict in the northern parts of Mozambique, facilitating interfaith dialogues, really looking at how to look at issues around violent extremisms and also issues around radicalization of young people, promoting inter-religious dialogue and addressing some of the root causes is what they actually did. Holding prayers in the last post-violence election period of October 24, holding services and praying for peace, calling for refraining from involvement in violent protests to their churches, protection of children and adults, and also urging the heads of state to dialogue. And some of the things that we learn from here is the need for prayer and spiritual support, promotion of nonviolent actions, protection of vulnerable groups, and also advocacy for dialogue. So prayer and spiritual support is important. And these are some of the things that the church can do. They can promote nonviolent actions, they can promote vulnerable groups, but they can also advocate and represent the voice of the communities on the ground, basically. And some of the challenges, you can move on. Yeah, you can move on. Move. Some of the challenges that we face as the church is that sometimes we lack practical skills on how to do the work effectively, in the sense that sometimes the language and everything, that sometimes the system and the setup of processes that have to do with conflict resolutions sometimes are complex, and we need to stand in to learn and also to accompany and to bring in guidance. I think sometimes we are also found to be non-partisan. I think the Rwanda genocide is a very good example where the devastating consequences when faith-based institutions abandon their non-partisan role. The close ties between the hierarchy and the genocidal regime resulted in complicity, a profound failure of moral leadership that costed countless lives in a way. We need impartial leadership in conflict resolution. I think we need to remain impartial. We need practical skills, but also we need research and evidence in the work that we'll be doing in conflict resolution. Sometimes, yes, we have good intentions, but it also adds to our spiritual guidance when we are able to then be able to articulate facts through research as well. So possibly to be able to invest in that, but also invest in our own training in a second order language to be able to speak what the language that's spoken around the table sometimes help as well. And also training our own people and our own institutions across the board on these issues of conflict resolution. For example, in Ethiopia, the Catholic Bishops' Conference, there after the war that we have heard in Tigray, they conducted a qualitative study on vulnerabilities, traumatization, on mental health and psychosocial support in terms of their attempts in healing the nation. And they have turned this research into a manual that can now be accessed by others as well. Now I would briefly look at some of the AACC interventions. So AACC makes rapport in peace times. So it's critical, it's important to build relations pre-conflict eruption, not to show up and try to find our feet when things are happening or during the crisis phase. So we need maybe perhaps to invest in building those connections pre-conflict. And I think that is important. And this is where the AACC does much of track 2 diplomacy in a way, which is basically talking to quite a number or a broad range of institutions across, multilateral institutions across, which we think is very, very important. And amongst these, including the African Union Commission itself, with its structures that range from the AU Interfaith Dialogue Forum, the regional economic communities such as the East Africa Community, the Intergovernmental Authority on Development, the African governance and the African peace and security architectures and things like that. I think it's very, very important. And also we work with other like-minded institutions besides our member churches, institutions that have expertise in some of the areas around conflict resolution. And so some of the institutions that we work with are, for example, the Kofi Annan International Peacekeeping Training Center in Ghana. We also work with the Institute of Peace and Security Studies in Addis Ababa. And we feel that this is very important for us to then begin to pass on our agenda and influence our agenda to be their own agenda as well, but also to be able to find allies. We think this is very, very important. We also, through this, we do have this memorandum of understanding with the African Union Commission, which basically gives us access to the Commission or the Secretariat of the African Union. But also we do kind of like pre-conflict or during conflict have quite a lot of relations with the diplomatic community in Addis Ababa. But for you to open doors, you must, in most cases, you find that if you already have a relationship, that eases you knocking on the doors and the door getting open during the time when there are many other institutions and organizations and people wanting to talk to them. They usually would give an ear to those that they have always been talking to. As AACC, we also hold roundtable consultations for religious leaders that are in conflict situations. Depending on the situation, sometimes the situation is also very difficult for them, and sometimes they need to be taken out of that context to get a bird's eye view of what is happening in their context, and then be able to reflect on that together outside their own context, and maybe be able to organize lobby events to some of the institutions that might be invisible hands, or some of the embassies that might be invisible to the conflicts that are happening in their own country. So facilitating those is very, very important, and also facilitating high-level engagements between our AACC eminent persons, we call them, with the African Union Peace and Security Council. Sometimes we organize meetings for them to go and brief and also engage in terms of their own perspectives on the conflicts as well. And we think that this is very, this is very important. You can move on to the next one. Sometimes we also organize joint ecumenical visits. It could be between FECLAHA, the WCC, and maybe the All Africa Conference of Churches, where during the visits here, they target different stakeholders. They don't just meet with one stakeholder. So a range of stakeholders. It could be government officials who are ministers, political groups, civil society groups, humanitarian groups, potential aid organizations as well, and possibly sometimes offices of donor organizations to some of the churches, institutions that are in country. And during these missions, we talk to key these stakeholders and allow for open dialogue and addressing specific concerns. We listen actively, which I think is very important. Such dialogues usually create a space for open communication, listening to different perspectives and fostering empathy. The goal is to create a shared understanding, even if there might not be an immediate agreement on solutions. The process often involves open-ended discussions, active listening, and exploring underlying interests and needs. The outcome is often increased understanding, improved communication, and clearing misconceptions and different narratives. And sometimes it's we go to this group, we come back to our core group, which might be a host council of churches and the member churches there, so that at the end of the mission, when we come to debrief, we would not realize that we actually had gone the wrong track. So we go out and come back and go out and come back and go out and come back so that we are addressing the concerns of the concerns as they are being felt by the member churches and the council of churches on the ground. We also document observations and make recommendations from the meetings. And during our engagement, for example, with some of these authorities, then we begin to dialogue and to negotiate some of the key elements that are actually coming out. And it also helps to build relationships post the missions, or when people would have gone back, that they would help to open certain doors, but also for certain communications to continue going on. This is just an example that I thought in terms of some of the work that we're actually doing. So this is part of the work that we do. This was a delegation that went to the East Africa community, and this was in 2022. And it's kind of like representatives from some of our people who went and met with the East Africa community. You can move slightly faster. And when they go onto the ground, like I said, they meet with quite a lot of stakeholders. So here, the first one, they met with some interfaith people. That's a group there to hear of the context and the challenges. Then you can move on. And then here, meeting with some of the regional governments as well. And then here, meeting with the Speaker of Parliament of the East Africa Legislative Assembly. It's one mission. And then here, they are meeting with the Secretary General of the East Africa Community. So it's a range of stakeholders. I just wanted to kind of like show a bit of some of the work that we do. And I also want to say that some of the issues that we struggle with in this work is basically when you look at conflicts on the African continent, and when we look at the Africa Peace and Security Architecture, where the Peace and Security Council of Africa is the main kind of like pillar, we actually find that within these pillars or this architecture, there is no pillar that actually relates to non-violence approaches to conflict in a way. And hence also the whole issue around early warning versus early response. So early warning, yes, the signs can be seen, but oftentimes the machinery or the whole system of the African peace and security architecture is very late to respond. That's if it responds effectively as well. And so sometimes we also advocate for the need to have these soft pillars of nonviolent approaches as well, and maybe for mediation to be pre-eruption of conflict as well as it is with post-eruption of conflict. Okay. And then I'm just coming to the end, and this is my last slide. Just a few takeaways again. I think the church has a role in peace building and mediation. The whole issue around insider mediation in the context where we work, I think it's very important. Engaged in advocacy and raising awareness, it's very important. I think during post-conflict, the care, humanitarian response from a healing and pastoral care is very important. The need to speak truth to power, I think it's very important in terms of promoting good governance and democracy. The need for us to research and documenting evidence, and maybe in contexts where we have different faiths, really that interdenominational approach, but also promoting interfaith dialogue, it's very, very important. I think I will rest my case here. Thank you very much for listening.
Thank you very much, our presenter. Perhaps we can hear somebody appreciate our speaker this morning, Presiding Bishop Zimbabwe. Please appreciate our speaker. Just a short response before I invite questions and answers.
Thank you very much, moderator. I want to take this time to appreciate Dr. Simango. As you know, Simango is a Zimbabwean name. It is also from Zimbabwe, but working for AACC. So you have requested his presiding bishop to appreciate the presentation. Thank you very much for your eloquence as you presented this lecture to us. You have touched a lot on conflict resolutions, which as churches we needed to follow. Thank you very much for your time and for coming to give us this detailed presentation. God bless you.
Thank you, Presiding Bishop. Let's appreciate again. We will invite responses, perhaps comments first, and then questions. Comment, I can take 2 or 3 comments on the lecture, and then questions later. Can I see hands on comments? Questions then? Yes, Bishop Abraham.
We appreciate the lecture that you have given to us, sir. Thank you very much. It was very good work that AACC has ever been doing. On behalf of South Sudan, we experienced 10 years of stable peace in the country, and we started moving on. But again, I would like to say you had engaged so much in other countries in mediating, and also in the current situation in South Sudan. But I would want to urge that AACC should do more. There was a time when another and he was questioning the leaders, the government, about how they cannot be able to sit together. And I really thank the intervention from our church that it has done. But much has to be done that AACC, currently the situation is not yet good. You should team up again and with the current leadership as AACC together with maybe AMC as well to bring up another opportunity of visit to Juba, so that the situation and the tensions that are still going high involving arrest of political leaders, and the situation is glim. We don't know where the future is going. So AACC, Africa Union came there. The president of Africa Union came last month. There was no avail of peace. The president of Kenya sent his envoy there. There was no avail of peace. And so that means politicians can't do much. But I think the church can do much in things of peace, either in DRC, where the tensions are going, or in South Sudan. Our situation is similar. So you do much. Discuss, take our opinion to the General Secretary, and actually on the part of the AU, as you are connected to AU, do the same. Take our voice that South Sudan politicians can't do much, but I think the church and the Commission for Peace, on behalf of the church represented there, should do more to help us come back to our senses as a nation. So that it is like a little bit of a question that I want you to take to that leadership so that you can do much. How can, when will they be able to do more in our nation and in other places? That you have given much report, what was happening in South Africa, Rwanda, and so, but we want AACC. The question is, when will they do more to help our situation come to normality? Thank you so much. Reverend William Upendo, South Sudan.
Thank you for those comments from Reverend Bishop Abraham. Can we take another comment or two? When Bishop Abraham speaks, is experiencing the real context of conflict. I want to hear whether there is another comment. That presentation then was wonderful by virtue of the responses of silence. With that then, let me ask the President to come and make some observations and comment.
Let me start by first thanking you for accepting our invitation to be with us. From the way you started, the greetings from the General Secretary of AACC, Fidon. I send our regards back to him, that we appreciate what he is doing for Africa. And then for the presentation you have made, we are looking at the transformation of Africa. And Africa is also engulfed in a lot of conflicts. And so going through this, it gives us the opportunity, because you are always looking out for people who can be part of delegations to go out there to seek the resolution of peace and turning people away from conflicts. Just last week, some of us were called by AACC, myself, Bishop Arnold Temple, and some colleagues, forming the Eminent Persons of Peace in Africa. And we went through things like this so that we could help in the resolution of some of the conflicts on the continent. So for us going through this, it's a head start for us, because it's not just conflicts at the higher level, but even within our churches, our denominations, where we lead and where we can also mediate in the affairs of denominations around us. So we are so grateful for guiding us, and we pray that as we live here, we'll go with this knowledge to help in our communities, so that peace, which is always found with our Lord and Savior Jesus Christ, will be the portion of our people. Thank you, and God richly bless you. Thank you. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. President. We want to await the GS to come and give us a way forward from this. But I do know this was our last part of our business. And we were scheduled to assemble for a press conference where our president is going to issue a statement. But before then, I need some guidance, Mr. President. From the GS is already here. GS is already here.
Thank you, Dr. Marumba. Good afternoon once again. The senior people always want to stand up, refresh, and do all those things. Keeping them long won't be good in terms of health. But I also fear that when they go out, they talk because they are mixing and mingling for a long time. We have got 2 issues to finish. The first one is, remember, we had sent people to look on the constitutional issues. Then the press statement. I think those are the only 2. So maybe can you assist me just to hear whether they're finished? So do you think you can finish those and go forever? Yes, okay.
Mr. President, in a conference of this kind of magnitude, before the press statement by the president, there should be communique. We don't have communique. What is the president going to read? Thank you.
That's what they'll bring for us to listen.
Have you selected some people to handle that?
Yes. They are working on it.
Okay.
Thank you very much, Prelate, for that. It's okay. So maybe Bishop Manga, you've come now. It's okay, President. Because we cannot do when the chair is not there.
Yeah, before we come out with the final statement, they will have to read it to us so that we own it. And then the final one can be. So it could be additions and subtractions, change of semantics and all of that. So we'll first listen to the group and what they have put down for us before the final one, in which we'll invite the press to be with us and they can take it from there. So I would ask that we buy some time for the group. So this is not going out, but we first have to, so this is in-house. This is in-house when they are done. So this one, yes. When they are done, we own it, we edit, then